Listeners, hello. We have a question for you. Are you interested in taking on a writing challenge in the new year? Something that will be both fun and supportive in getting a lot of words on the page? If so, we have something to tell you about. Grant, do you want to do the honors?
Yeah, I'm going to assume that everyone said yes to those questions just to start. And I am excited for our very first inaugural JanYourStory event where we'll be offering a challenge to Memoir Nation listeners, community members, and denizens, your friends, your enemies, whoever wants to join us in January to write 500 words a day. So I was executive director of National Novel Writing Month for 12 years. And the basic premise of that is that all you need is a goal and a deadline to really get the writing that you say you want to do, get it done and written now. We say a goal and a deadline is a creative midwife. And a good dose of community helps. And we also, we truly want to make writing fun. And that's really the spirit behind the event.
That's right. And it is totally free. You do not have to be a paying member of Memoir Nation to do this challenge, to join us for this challenge. You don't even have to be a listener of this podcast. So please go tell your writerly friends. Even more, you do not have to be a memoirist. JanYourStory is about writing, celebrating writing, and getting writing done in January. And if you complete the challenge, you will have written 15,000 words, which is a really motivating way to start the new year.
Yeah, so to get yourself poised to join us, all you have to do is go to memoirnation.com, go to the community button at the top menu, sign up for an account, and voila. Inside the community at the free level, there's a place to introduce yourself, to chat with other writers, and to see details about JanYourStory. And we'll be updating a lot of info in the next 2 months. So your action, rather your challenge today, right now, is to go and sign into our community. I promise you'll not regret it. In fact, I hope you'll leave with a memoir.
Yeah, really, it is going to be very supportive, very low pressure, and JanYourStory at a minimum will help you write more words than you will otherwise write in January. So open your browser on your computer or your phone, go to Memoir Nation, click community, and you're on your way.
Hello, time managers, time wasters, clock watchers, procrastinators, doodlers, and dawdlers. I'm Grant Faulkner, and I'm punctually here for you for the next 30 to 45 minutes with my very time-minded and equally punctual co-host, Brooke Warner. And thanks for always being on time, Brooke. I'm one of those somewhat horrible people who thinks punctual people are just fundamentally better people than those who are late, much to the chagrin of several members of my family.
Yes, well, it's Thursday, November 20th, 12 o'clock Pacific time, just so everyone knows. And it's time to move on, Grant, because we do have some very important time management tips to impart today. And I don't even think we're going to be here for 45 minutes today. It's a much more punctual episode than that.
Yeah, we're going to be very efficient, everybody. No tangents that I'm going to take. So, but please don't rush me, Brooke. But the reason we're here is to talk about JanYourStory prep. And if you don't know about JanYourStory, it is Memoir Nation's January challenge to write 500 words per day in January. And so time is on our minds because when I used to be executive director of National Novel Writing Month and was asked what my most important tip was for writers, I always said that the tip that helped the most was perhaps the least sexy, and that's time management. And I say that because in the case of NaNoWriMo, you had to write about 1,700 words per day, which translates into at least 2 hours of writing for most people. So often people would sign up and they'd kind of expect their lives to give them those 2 hours per day. And that's just not the way things happen. You have to be an active agent with your time. You have to have a strategy to open up 2 hours of writing time each day for a month. So we would advise people to go on a time hunt, which meant recording literally how you spend your time every week and literally writing things down in 15-minute increments and then evaluating what you can give up, things like social media, or maybe you write during your lunch break, or maybe you wake up earlier for a month or stay up later or skip going out on the weekends. You can say no to parties that you don't want to go to because you're an introvert, or even do power writing sessions on the weekend. And we never think of writing being about math. And our guest today, Laura Vanderkam, gave some really illuminating math in our conversation with her. But I just want to emphasize how much you can get done in small increments of time. And one of my favorite stories is that Toni Morrison was a working mother in New York City single mother with 2 kids, and she really only had 15 minutes a day to write. And she was exhausted at that point. It was right before she went to bed. But that's how she wrote her first novel, in 15 minutes a day. And if you can write 200 words a day, that's 6,000 words a month, which is 72,000 words in a year. And that's a full memoir. So Brooke, one thing I often hear about you is that people can't believe all that you do. And I personally feel like I'm a hard worker, gets a lot done, but I'm still like, Brooke is a machine. There are 10 Brookes. So do you get so much done because of the way you use time, or do you have any particular strategies?
Yeah, I mean, probably the former, how I use time. I am a good multitasker. I work efficiently. I'm sure I have good time management skills in there, but my work is a lot about juggling and toggling.
Mm-hmm.
So like I go back and forth between stuff. And I think if somebody asked me to keep a timesheet, I would probably say no, or you wouldn't want to see it because it's so chaotic. I would just spend more time keeping the timesheet than I would just getting the things done that I need to get done. So I kind of work as I think about things. That's another thing. And I don't necessarily recommend that either, but it does work for me. And so I think the result of all of that is just a lot of output.
Mm-hmm.
But Grant, I have actually heard the same thing about you. I mean, you are, if I'm 10 Brookes, you're definitely at least 9 Grants.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good ratio, I think. Maybe even 8.
Yes, exactly. So we've confessed that we're workaholics on the show too. I'm just curious, do you only work hard or do you have a strategy?
I'm like you. It's so funny. I don't have a strategy, and I also am just juggling and toggling and going back and forth. And like you said, it would be a chaotic mess of if I track something or try to adhere to something, it just wouldn't work if I wrote it down. I used to keep just a to-do list on the back of an envelope, and I don't even do that anymore. But I think one thing that's interesting about time management is the realization of what you say is important to you, but what you're not making time for. Like time management is an emotional thing in the end, or has that component to it. And I've been struggling to write my memoir for really a couple of years now. And I've realized how much I need to systematize the time to write, to literally block it off and build a moat around it. And when I was less busy, less toggling and juggling, I could wake up early and write for an hour or two before I had to walk my dog at like 7 o'clock. And I had no problem doing that. It just happened. But now I'm avowedly too busy. So when I wake up, I let the day's to-dos encroach upon my writing time or really just invade it. And the thing is that invasion isn't happening to me. I think I let it happen. And so I'm very interested in how our emotions affect our choices, and sometimes without us even really knowing it. And I think I allow my kind of fortress of creative time to be torn down by email every day. And I wake up and I think I need positive reinforcement, and I get that by feeling productive. And I can answer email, make decisions, feel progress, and then feel productive. And I think that leads me to even feeling loved. So unless I get an annoying or angry email, like I'm just feeling good about myself. So I've become, sensitive to the fact that I'm making choices that are emotionally driven, even if they're not articulated. So I'm trying to truly block out my writing time and protect it, and to recognize the emotional benefits and blocks I get from my writing. And I'm only now trying to write 30 minutes a day, and then for an hour a day in January. So that should not be difficult. So Brooke, a couple of years ago, a time management book came out that became, very trendy, and it's called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And 4,000 weeks corresponds to 80 years. So most people's life expectancy, more or less. And the author, Oliver Burkeman, writes, the real measure of any time management technique is whether or not it helps you neglect the right things. And I used to tell people during NaNoWriMo that no one yelled out on their deathbed that they wished they'd kept a cleaner house. Yet many people cry out that they wish they'd written their story. So is there something you can neglect in January, or can't, just to open up some writing time?
It's a great question. I really thought about it for a minute here. I'm not even sure for me. I mean, it's like giving things up, but I was also thinking about moving my priorities around. Like you, I'm an early riser and I do get a lot done in the morning. So as we were talking, I was like, what am I doing in the morning? Mm-hmm. It is my most productive time, but I definitely use it for emailing. So I want to say I'm going to be doing JanYourStory very earnestly. And I want to say 100% that it has to be the first thing that I do, before I check my email, before any social media or any kinds of engagements. I just cannot have the time sucks or the distractions. So it's going to be my goal, to knock it out in the morning. And just interestingly, that is historically how I've exercised as well. Like if I want to get it done, I can't have it hanging over me all day. But if I were to neglect something, I guess I could say I could give up cooking, but that would mean it would fall to my wife and she might have something to say about that. Or, take out all month and we'd probably be fine with that.
You inevitably have to make some sort of trade-off, or that's what I find with my life. And I'm going to give you another Berkman quote, Brooke. But before I do, I actually had the idea while you were talking that maybe we should do like a daily check-in after like at 7:30 or 8 to see if we actually did our writing for the month of January.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And that's like having a gym partner. I mean, everybody should do that for sure.
Yeah. So maybe we can do that and report back to people. But the Berkman quote is, what you pay attention to will define for you what reality is. And I've defined myself by paying attention to my creativity for most of my life. So I'm actually very alarmed that I'm then paying attention to so many other things than my creativity at the moment. And so I'm going to neglect my email.
Woohoo.
Yeah. and then
no one's going to hear back from Grant in January.
And then I will jump into a pile of it just a little bit later in the day though. And I once heard someone say, and this is like something to think about, to be careful when sending an email because then you have to deal with the response you get, which then takes more time. So I'm just going to send less email, so that I will hopefully get less email and that will open up time for writing. So we'll see.
I love that strategy. Oh my gosh. If that works, I am for sure adopting it. So do let me know. I really can't wait to hear from Laura Vanderkam here. She's got some great perspectives on time. It is time to make time to write, so think about that. It's like a Zen cone, and we'll be back after this short break.
Welcome back, everybody. I am super excited to talk to Laura Vanderkam again because I interviewed her or talked with her on several NaNoWriMo webcasts back in the day about time management. And Laura is the author of several time management and productivity books, including the forthcoming Big Time, A Simple Path to Time Abundance, which is coming out in May 2026, so pre-order it. And she's also written Tranquility by Tuesday, Juliet's School of Possibilities, Off the Clock, I Know How She Does It, What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, and 168 Hours. And her work has appeared in publications including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and Fortune. She is the host of the podcast Before Breakfast and the co-host with Sarah Hart Unger of the podcast Best of Both Worlds. And she lives outside of Philadelphia with her husband and 5 children. And she blogs at lauravanderkam.com. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we initially connected because you are a time management guru who also writes novels, also does creative things in your life, which makes you just the perfect guest for Memoir Nation as well. And I'm going to start by quoting from your book, 168 Hours, and reading the quote now. People always tell me there aren't enough hours in the day to get to do everything I want to do, which is true. But we don't live our lives in days, we live our lives in weeks. Think 168 hours instead of 24 hours and everything changes. So can you tell us more what it's like to have a kind of week mindset instead of a day mindset?
Absolutely. I think a week mindset is just a much more accurate representation of time. If somebody were to look at your life on a Tuesday and to look at your life on a Saturday, they would probably get different impressions, right, of what your life looks like and what your time is spent doing. But Tuesday and Saturday both occur just as often. So one is not any more normal than the other. So we want to have a unit of time as a impression of our lives that encompasses both of them. I also just think it's important to have this mindset because it shows us how much time we have. A lot of people, for instance, who have big things going on in their lives, like for instance, they are working full time. It's like, well, that sounds like the full amount of my time. But a full-time work week is, about 40 hours a week. If there are 168 hours in a week, we quickly see that there is some time outside those 40 hours that we might be able to do some other things with. The equation I always do for people, if you sleep 8 hours a night, so that is 56 hours a week, and you work 40 hours a week, so, full-time job, subtract those two from 168, well, we got 72 hours for other things. So 72 hours is a fair amount of time. It's probably enough time to, work on your memoir, write your novel, whatever it is that you would like to do with your time.
Laura, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what do I do with those 72 hours?
I don't know what you do with those 72 hours, Grant. Many people don't know. But this is the thing. You could keep track of it and you could try to see. Because, a lot of times we have this story that we don't have time. But I think this 168 hours perspective helps us see that there may be some time available if we are creative about repurposing it for the things we want to do.
That is fascinating. I think, Grant, you're taking at least a few hours of those napping.
Well, then we add to the sleeping total, right? Maybe our sleeping total goes up. We're like 60, 65 hours.
As Brooke is out of me, I am on the professional napping circuit. I'm one of the best nappers in the country.
Well, Laura, what do you tell people who say, I don't have time to write my memoir until I retire? I'm curious about that because you've written novels and nonfiction books. And so how much time per week do you think someone realistically needs to make meaningful progress on a book project?
Well, I don't think you need an incredible amount of time. You don't even need all of those 72 hours that are outside your working hours. So I think if you could carve out even just a few hours a week, but do it consistently, that is the key to making progress. So, anybody can find 1 hour a week or even, 30 minutes a day over the course of the week. The question is, can you keep doing that? Can you keep doing that for several weeks, for several months? I think a lot of people get distracted and get discouraged because sometimes these things don't go as fast as we want, or, you're trying to figure out how to talk about something, or you got a little bit of writer's block or whatever the problem is. And so people don't keep going. And we put the explanation on it that it's a lack of time, but it isn't a lack of time. Right? It's just either it's not a priority in your life right now, which could be the case. There might be reasons for that. It's that you don't know for sure how you want to approach it or what you want to say, or you're worried about what you're saying or things like that. But I do believe that even a couple hours a week, if you just keep going, will produce pretty fantastic results.
Yeah, I'm really into that notion of using pockets of time as well. I always quote this story that Toni Morrison wrote her first novel in 15 minutes a day. That's all she had to write. And on that note, most time management advice is geared towards efficiency and task completion. And so I'm just curious if you approach time management differently when the goal is creative work, that can't be maybe as rushed or measured the same way. And then creative work, sometimes when people prioritize creative work, it comes with guilt because they're not doing other things that maybe are more practical for their lives.
Well, there's a couple ways to think about this. I mean, one with creative work, in general, we don't have to find time for something every single day. That's part of having this 168 hours perspective. I maintain that anything that happens 3 times a week is a habit. So can we find 3 writing sessions a week? I think if we look out the whole of 168 hours, we probably can, even if it means, wake up early one morning a week, maybe one evening. We do the Toni Morrison thing, right? 15 minutes at night, do it on the weekend for a little bit. We've come up with 3 sessions there. And so that can often alleviate some of the guilt because it's not like every night I'm choosing between playing with my kids and writing this memoir. It's like, okay, maybe one night a week when they are with the other parent, right? Like play with them. So you trade off and you can each have a night to do your own thing. Or getting up early one day a week. You don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. every single morning. You just do it once. Do something on the weekend. Maybe the kids are taking a nap or out at a friend's. So it's possible to find 3 sessions a week. And I think that will alleviate some of the guilt. We don't have to do things every day for them to count in our lives. And when we don't do something every single day, then we don't have the same harsh trade-offs that we are often thinking success tends to require. But I also think that we can be a little bit too precious about creative work as well. I think one of the reasons I have been able to kind of stick with writing long term and write a lot of books is that I treat it like work as anything else. If I am writing a book and I am going to have 12 chapters, I have a calendar of like, okay, I'm producing a chapter every 2 weeks. And the first week I will be writing a draft. And the second week I will be doing a rough revision of it. And then moving on to the next one and going and keeping with it like this. And Yeah, is it going to be perfect? No. I mean, it's certainly not going to be Toni Morrison level stuff, but it is going to be there. And it is often better, easier to turn something into something better versus nothing into something. And so I think this idea of just keep going and trying to get rid of the perfectionism that a lot of people feel around creative work is the key to making it actually happen. I'm going to completely mess up the citation here, but I was just saw a study referenced of people who made pottery, and some people were told to make the best they possibly could, and some people were told just to make a lot. And the people who made a lot tend to make better things than those who are told to make their best, because just in the course of doing a lot of anything, you figure how it works. You figure out how to make things sound better. You figure out what you're trying to say. So don't aim for amazing, aim for a lot and done. And it will probably wind up better at the end of it.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
I love that. I actually read that in Art and Fear, the book Art and Fear, but it did cite a study that I don't know what the study was.
Yes,
But
I know.
yeah.
I got to find the citation before I keep citing it.
Thank you for refreshing my memory about it, because I'd forgotten that.
It's inspiring too, because it's such a perfect analogy for writing. More is better, finish it. So it's, it can be our mantra here. I'm curious why people resist making time for something they claim to care deeply about. I'm wondering, you were working in this space, so how do you help people distinguish between I don't have time or I'm afraid to start, or if they're starting, I'm afraid to finish, which definitely happens with writing.
Yeah, I think it's just about making a small habit. So carve out a little bit of time, put it on your to-do list like anything else, and then give yourself permission to delete it at the end. Or if you're doing this by hand, sometimes people think it's lower stakes if you're doing it by hand versus on the computer or something. You could write longhand and then you could rip it up at the end of it if you would like. It is just to sort of establish the habit of doing it, and that it doesn't have to be amazing. But the more you do that, the more you're going to create something that could be more like what you want to do. I mean, your first golf game is not going to be perfect, right? Like if you have never played golf before and you go out to do it, your first game is going to be terrible. But that doesn't mean that you should never play again or that you can't get better. You will, but you just have to keep playing. And so it's the same thing with writing. People who want to write tend to have really good ideas of what writing should be because they've read a lot and they've read fantastic work that's out there. And so if you're writing your memoir, you of course read the best memoirs that are on the market, and you're writing something and it's not going to look anything like that because it can't. But then those works didn't look exactly like that when they first started out too. I mean, in many cases, they have gone through years of edits to get to the point where other people are reading them. So if you give yourself enough runway, you're going to create something that's a lot better. And particularly if there's more iterations, if you have a finished product that you can then have people read and try out and give feedback on, it's going to get better from there. But you can't get to that part until something exists.
Well, Laura, I've been enjoying this illuminating new math that you do. I can't believe I've never broken a week into 168 hours or defined a habit as doing something 3 times a week. I think that's a fantastic redefinition of a habit. And so I'm just kind of curious if you have any tips about creating a sustainable creative practice that goes years, not weeks, because that's what it takes to finish a memoir or a novel, and especially how do people maintain momentum when life is going to inevitably interrupt their writing routine. That happens to me all the time, in fact.
So I think recognizing that it doesn't have to necessarily be at the same time every day is helpful. I have a weekly planning ritual where I sit down and look at the upcoming week and figure out where I can do anything that is a priority for me.
Mm-hmm.
I highly suggest anyone who has a busy life do this. So you sit down once a week, look at the forthcoming week, say what is most important to me professionally, what is most important to me personally. One of those things that might be most important to you personally might be making progress on your creative project. And that might mean I need to find 3 sessions over the course of the week to work on my creative project. You look at the week, you see where these things can go. You block them in just as you would your dentist appointment, or, that you need to go pick up a kid at soccer practice, or that you have a project due at work. And the real pro tip here is that we're going to build in a backup session too. So you're not just going to have, if your goal is 3, we are not just going to put in 3. We are going to put in 4. Now, why are we going to put in 4? because inevitably one of those is going to be taken away from you, right? That the, kids' soccer practice runs over, or the work project takes longer than you thought it was going to, or you meant to get up early to do something, but it was a rough night with your baby and you can't do that. So we're going to have 4 sessions. And so one is taken away from you, we still have 3. If 2 are taken away from you, you still have 2. And so it doesn't feel like the kind of thing that I'm almost never getting to do, or getting to maybe once a week. I mean, when we're getting to 2, when we're getting to 3, again, this is a regular part of our lives. And that keeps the narrative going that I am the kind of person who writes regularly. I am a writer. That backup slot is incredibly important for keeping that story about our lives.
I love the fact of having a story of your life as a writer and as a writer who shows up regularly. That is important for momentum unto itself.
Absolutely. Well, Grant has been using this word systematize a lot, talking about his time management strategy for writing, and we are certainly trying to get systematized here. So do you have any tips about different ways people can systematize their writing time?
So I think having a ritual that gets you in the mindset of now I am writing, maybe that's that you go to a certain place. For some people, it might be that you have your favorite trusty mug that you use for coffee or hot chocolate or tea or water or whatever it is that you are using to hydrate yourself while you are working. Maybe it is that you have some sort of ritual that involves telling someone that you're going to write. Maybe you send a quick note or a text to your accountability partner and say, I'm sitting down to work on my memoir now. And then you text that person again an hour later to say that you had your session. But things like that can make it feel more like, okay, this is what is happening now, and get you quickly into the mindset of being in that creative space. Versus just sort of hoping it will happen, right? That we can teach ourselves to be more in the habit than we were.
Well, Laura, in closing, way back when we first met, you introduced me to the phrase time confetti, which I love as a phrase and as a concept. And so I was wondering if you can define time confetti for us and then give us some tips on how people can use time confetti to make more time for writing or other things too.
Yeah, so time confetti is actually a phrase that was come up with Bridget Schulte, who wrote a book called Overwhelmed more than a decade ago now. And I think she had sort of a negative spin on it, like that, yes, we may have discretionary time in our lives, but it comes in these tiny little chunks that are impossible to use well. They're just a mess. They are confetti, right? Like confetti is like all over the place. You're vacuuming it out of the rug. It's not really necessarily a positive image when it comes to time. But the truth is, you can do a lot in time confetti if you are sort of honest and disciplined about it. I mean, you mentioned Toni Morrison writing The Bluest Eye in 15-minute chunks. I mean, most of us are not Toni Morrison, but on the other hand, we can do something in those chunks of time. 15 minutes is enough to read a little bit in somebody else's memoir to see how a good memoir is structured. It's enough time to check in with one of your writing friends to see how they're coming, and they'll return the favor for you and keep you motivated when you're feeling a little bit less like you want to keep going. It's enough time to do things that help us physically. I mean, like doing push-ups or sit-ups or going for a brisk walk. There's all sorts of things you can do in just very small chunks of time. So rather than completely losing this time to things like scrolling, which is what we tend to do with our time confetti, thinking about what would be possible to do during small chunks of time to advance me toward the life I want empowers you to then choose one of those things when these small chunks of time appear. And if you do that, I think you'll have a much more satisfying life.
Well, thanks so much, Laura. This has been totally enlightening. I'm going to spend some time today pondering how I spend that 72 hours, the lost 72 hours every week. I don't think I do all of it napping, just,
just half. Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much. This has been great for my creative fuel. And I've been rethinking my own kind of approach, because I use the word systematize a lot lately because I don't really have a good system.
Confession. Yes. Thank you, Laura. It's really awesome. I think this is going to be so helpful for us as we start thinking about getting ready for our JanYourStory event. So thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Brooke, it's so interesting to me because I've read time management books and I've interviewed people, time management gurus like Laura, and I've analyzed the way I use time a lot. So you'd think I'd have it all figured out by this time, but I just loved how Laura recast time with just a simple math. It's kind of like the math of writing a novel, breaking it down into smaller chunks, or a memoir, of course. And I'm just really taken by the notion of focusing on blocks of time like 168 hours instead of 24 hours. And then especially the idea that if we subtract 56 hours for sleep and 40 hours for work, then we have 72 luxurious, expansive hours of time, And but somehow I think I've only got 10 or so hours of free time. I can't get that math to work in my consciousness, I guess, or I'm not willing to face the math. I mean, if I have 72 hours of time, you'd think I'd be able to write my memoir for 30 minutes a day, because that's only 4 hours a week, and yet that's not happening of late. I don't quite understand why with that math. But what about you? Did anything stand out for you from the interview?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking about that 72-hour figure, but I am thinking too about what she said about time confetti. I really loved that. These days, I think we tend to reach for our phones, whenever there's an interlude, but a big part of that 72 hours of time each week consists of a lot of pockets of time when you just impulsively get out your phone and scroll instead of choosing something else. And I don't think you have to be hyper productive and use every minute of your day. It's also good to daydream and replenish. But so many of us are using time confetti, for the activities instead of for the things that we say we want to do. So I really am going to think about that in my own life. And honestly, if I have to think of JanYourStory like time confetti, that's kind of a win-win. So I'm excited about that. I want to find more time confetti, and I want to, just use my time and be inspired by, someone like Toni Morrison, who was able to write in those cracks, like you say.
Maybe we'll just keep the confetti flowing from January 1st all the way through the month.
Absolutely. Steady stream of confetti.
Yeah, listeners, you can use your time confetti or your stream of flow, your river of time to listen to the Memoir Nation podcast, of course. And we just thank you so much for making time for us. We thank you for making time for your writing. And I hope you make time to sign up for Memoir Nation and our writing event in January. JanYourStory. It's pretty simple. 500 words a day. That's maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour at the very most. So keep making time for your story, and we'll see you here next week with another segment of our JanYourStory prep series.